Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom. A rematch of the Western Conference Finals does not go the Timberwolves' way. In-depth breakdown of last night's loss, plus early season red flags, and the good stuff happening as well with the Minnesota Timberwolves coming up right now.
This is Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcast. It's endless Minnesota Timberwolves talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Basketball Party on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Wolves talk every Wednesday on the Minnesota Basketball Party. It's part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Please subscribe. We'd appreciate that. Thanks for watching, listening, and commenting. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us your first watch or listen. For your second one, check out Locked On Wolves with Ben Beacon. Great daily Wolves content, and our audio is available on that very podcast feed. We've got a lot to get into on this show, including a 120-114 loss to the Dallas Mavericks, big Kyrie and Luka performance, a frustrating defeat for the Timberwolves to fall to 2-2. But let's meet today's panel with our opening tip.
I'm Jack Borman, co-host of the Locked On Wolves postcast with my man Luke Inman, and I am going to get into why I thought last night was just the entire Julius Randle experience that we will get to know over the coming months.
Reggie Wilson, sports director at Care 11, and no, he didn't. Yes, he did. Luka did it to him again. Target Center does not know peace when that man is in the building.
And I'm Ron Johnson, former Gophers, NFL wide receiver. Lost my voice last night cheering at volleyball, so sorry for the voice. But I'm going to talk about why Halloween, the Timberwolves were a little bit Cinderella-ish last night.
I'm Ben Beacon, host of the Daily Locked On Wolves podcast. I'll talk a little bit about how some of the issues from the Mavs game aren't necessarily red flags from early in the season. It was a bit of a weird game, and why I wouldn't be pulling the fire alarm yet.
And I'm Sam Ekstrom, executive producer here at Locked On Sports Minnesota. At the end of the show, we'll also predict the upcoming week for the Timberwolves. I think I nailed it last week. I think I said you beat the Kings, you beat the Raptors, you fall to the Mavericks, and you end up at 2-2. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Jack Borman, you were at Target Center last night in press row watching the Mavs win 120-114. I think people have already gotten the idea from us that it was a weird game. It was an interesting Julius Randle game, an interesting Ant game, a legendary Kyrie game, and closer Luka shows up in the fourth quarter, buries the Wolves with a 40-footer. And they couldn't get a rebound in the fourth quarter. But I got to hear your take. Big postcast last night, by the way. Check out the postcast with Luke Inman and Jack Borman. Let's hear from Jack Borman on the L they took to the Mavs.
Yeah, we thought we were going to be in for a historic Anthony Edwards game with the way that he started. I think that's probably my biggest takeaway so far from the Timberwolves season through 4 games is just Anthony Edwards' shot volume, especially from beyond the arc, is way up. He's shooting 13 threes a game at 41.5%. That's like Steph Curry level volume, which is pretty incredible that he's been able to maintain that pace. He made 6 of his 8 in the first quarter. But just 1 of 5 from the rest of the game. It was kind of one of those classic, Ant explosions that we've seen in the last couple of seasons where he has a huge first quarter. Then he takes 1 shot in the second quarter. I don't think he scored in the second quarter. And then scored just 5 points in the third quarter. I think it was just a matter of the Timberwolves couldn't really get him back into that same rhythm that he was in the first quarter, which was tough. And the problem for the Timberwolves is just that, they don't really have a clear identity when Anthony Edwards is off the floor and a clear hierarchy of like, okay, this is the guy we're trying to play through. Here's our second option. Here's our third option that you very clearly saw with the Dallas Mavericks last night. I think I would personally like to see more of Nas and Jaden McDaniels playing together. I think Chris Finch needs to empower Jaden McDaniels a little bit more with the ball in his hands. I think we've seen really good stretches from Jaden McDaniels and good flashes with the ball in his hands so far this season. Certainly looks improved from last year, especially on the drive and kicking it out to his teammates. So I'd like to see more of that. at the start of the second and fourth quarters. That's something that I was clamoring for all year last year on the postcast, and and maybe get Jaden and Nas in there with more of Nikhil and Dante. I've liked what those guys have done together. So but on the bright side, I think we saw that the Julius Randle and Nas Reed front court pairing looked a little bit better offensively, especially in the first half last night. Got into a little bit better flow offensively, spaced the floor pretty well, and guys were cutting and moving without the ball, and just kind of had a little bit more kinetic energy in the offense, which was great. And then they switched 1 through 5 on the defensive end of the floor, which was also something that we hadn't seen yet this season. So it was kind of interesting just to see Chris Finch want to try out a few different things. But yeah, like you said, the big downfall there was just that they couldn't buy a rebound. And, Dallas started 11 of 15 in the third quarter, and 2 of those misses they put back in. So, that's something that the Wolves will have to clean up. But like Ben alluded to, I agree completely that I don't think there's anything that you saw last night that is cause for panic in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, certainly not a loss like the Lakers game where it was a 7-point loss and it was hideous. That was a 6-point loss where, I mean, you saw a lot of good stuff, and the dagger was the Luka logo 3. Reggie, you alluded to that. Shades of game 2 last year, and that was the most frustrating sequence ever because it was a miss. You had a chance to I think get the rebound down 4, down 3, what have you. Chance to really cut into that deficit. Lively goes over the back. Washington steps out of bounds. Nothing's called, and then it ends up in a Luka 3. Just a devastating sequence.
Yeah, it was brutal. And, you couldn't help but think, there have been a few times, the Sabrina shot in the WNBA finals. That was similar. And then Luka does it again, and he's chirping at the fans. And, maybe probably not in the eyes of the fans, but maybe this lets Rudy off the hook a little bit. This time he did it to Nikhil. And, time is expiring and didn't really seem to get his full, follow through in it either. And it's just nothing but net splash. And so that sometimes it feels like the Mavs are just a bad matchup for the Wolves. And I think it's tough to say because this Wolves team is a little bit different from that last one in the Western Conference Finals, and they're still trying to figure things out. But I think Ant really wanted to come out and try to set the tone. And to his credit, he's looking like a guy who could be potentially close to a 30-point scorer this year. I don't know if that volume is going to keep up or the scoring, but coming out 6 of 8 from 3 and really just sizzling in that first quarter. It was interesting. It kind of reminded me of a Justin Jefferson type game where he comes out and he plays well at the start, and then it just kind of fizzles a little bit down the stretch. But one thing that I also saw, besides the Luka shot and Kyrie going off for 35, it felt like deja vu because those two dudes are just killers out there. I don't know that there's a better duo in the league right now. Maybe Tatum and Brown, but those dudes are just ridiculous, especially when they play the Timberwolves. But one thing that doesn't help, 20 turnovers, 20 turnovers from the Wolves last night. And I think that's just a part of, the clunky, still trying to figure things out. Jack made a great point that, they still just are looking for that offensive identity. Like who's the alpha when Anthony Edwards is not on the court? And you like what you've seen from Julius Randle so far. He's been hooping. I mean, solid stat line last night with was it 27 and 7? Like that's not bad. 3 from 3, 3 of 3 from 3, like that. That's a pretty good stat line. You'll take that from Julius Randle. Pretty efficient with his minutes last night. But it just they still just need to figure some things out. I don't think you like just 3 points from DiVincenzo in 26 minutes. He's probably still trying to find his footing with the new team. So they're still just trying to figure this thing out. I think the matchup on Christmas will be a little bit different.
Yeah, we'll get into some of those red flags as well, like DiVincenzo's point totals. Mike Conley's had a weird start to the season, but focusing on last night's game, Ben, what'd you take away?
Yeah, I mean, it was so weird. Like, it's one of those where you glance at the box score and you think, they won this game, right? They outshot them, better field goal percentage, better 3-point percentage, more made threes, more free throw attempts, more free throw makes, more assists, right? Like you glance at it, you're like, okay, they actually out rebounded them. I know that they didn't rebound in some key spots, but like if you glance at the box score, it's like, all right, they probably won this game. And then you see the turnovers that Reggie mentioned. They turned the ball over 20 times. Dallas only turned it over 9 times. And that compounded the fact that their transition defense has been so bad to start this season. And we saw that, 2 years ago, the Wolves had a terrible transition defense. Last year, it was very good. And now this year, it looks more like it did 2 years ago than what it did last year. And so the turnovers, a lot of those live ball turnovers led to Dallas opportunities the other way. Dallas was also running after makes. They were running after free throw attempts. They cherry picked a couple of times. Like there were some unfortunate ones mixed in there, but the Wolves just simply weren't hustling back enough defensively. And the turnovers led to a lot of those opportunities. And they still only lost by 6 points. So a lot of self-inflicted wounds. You mentioned, I think, Sam, at the Lakers game off the top. Like the Lakers game, they just didn't play well at all. That was just a bad all-around game. The Wolves offense, when they actually got shots in this game, they got good shots and they made their shots. I mean, they shot almost 51% from the field. They shot 49% from three, 19 made threes. They got to the line 26 times, but they turned it over 20 times and they missed 9 free throws. I mean, that's the story of the game. And again, the turnovers leading to transition points the other way. The half-court defense, I thought, was spotty at best the first 3 quarters. It really wasn't very good, but it was really good in the fourth quarter. And that was just Luke and Kyrie being Luke and Kyrie, mostly Kyrie. I actually thought the perimeter defense got a lot better in the fourth quarter. So I think it's all related. Really a lack of urgency. I don't think it's like necessarily a too cool for school situation, but like I just think that they're a little lackadaisical in the half court offense leading to turnovers, and then a little lackadaisical getting back on defense. And you can get away with that against the Toronto Raptors or, maybe even against the Kings, but you can't get away with it against a team like the Mavericks that has Luke and Kyrie. That already is a difficult matchup for you. So I think it's one of those things where, as they play these tough games, and of course we'll talk about the upcoming schedule, like Denver on Friday and then the Spurs on the road on a back-to-back, like that's tough. You gotta be a little tighter in some of these areas if you're going to win consistently, and you're going to beat bad teams playing like you did in this game. And it's a lot of the same problems they had last year, at least in terms of the turnovers. The defense, certainly it's surprising that it's struggling so much, and maybe we get into the offense a little bit, but like, I think overall the offense to me has been encouraging. I think that Randall's been great in the half court. I think Ant, for the most part, picked his spots pretty well in this game. Obviously he had the huge first quarter and was then quiet, but I didn't really have a problem with his decision-making. So it was really the turnovers leading to transition opportunities, and then the missed free throws, where they, attempted 8 more free throws than Dallas in this game, but they only made 3 more than Dallas. So the 6 more missed free throws was a big issue as well. So certainly fixable things that to me aren't major issues in the long term because they are so fixable. Just frustrating that they had to happen against a team of the caliber of the Mavericks. And hopefully that means the Wolves will learn a lesson from it.
Yeah, it is frustrating to see those turnovers rear their ugly head a second consecutive year, seeming like a chronic issue. Ron, you said last night's game felt Cinderella-ish. Explain that to me.
Yeah, Ant was Cinderella in the first quarter, and then felt like midnight struck, and he had to hurry to get those shoes off. If he didn't get them off, they were going to turn back into God knows what. Because, I mean, super ironic. I got him back here. I think Ant dropped him. Like, I think he dropped his slipper. So I'm going to go try to find him and see if I can find him and find the slipper. When I saw the 24-point start, I was like, man. I mean, and I tweeted the Jordan meme because of how many threes he was hitting. And then, of course, I got killed by a couple people in my DMs and a couple tweets. People are like, oh, they can't win the game. They can't do. I'm like, dude, look at the timestamp of when I tweeted this. Like, it was not for the whole game. It was literally the first quarter. He killed in the first quarter. Felt like Jordan's son. And I think everybody was dead on. Like, they have to find another guy. They have to find another alpha, and they have to understand who's the alpha when he's out. The coach has to empower it, or somebody has to take it. I thought it would be Dante DiVincenzo. I don't know if that's probably what it's going to be. Julius Randle, I don't know if you want to give him that power because he is already a, kill the ball type of guy. And so at some point, like one of the, maybe Rob Dillingham, maybe, I don't know. It has to be somebody though. Somebody has to come in and keep that same energy going. Maybe the way the start started, the team just assumed, oh, we're about to blow the Mavericks out this building. And it didn't keep going. So every athlete knows this. Like, you can't take your foot off the pedal. Anytime you think you have a lead is not a lead. And especially in a game like basketball, and especially after the first quarter. Felt real Sam Darnold-ish, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in the first quarter. And then by the fourth quarter, where could we like put a red and white striped shirt on Sam Darnold? Because where is he? Hasn't been great. So that's what it felt like. I'm not saying that that's the case for Ant. We know he's a great player, but they do have to find that. As an athlete, as a competitor, you have to realize, like, it's not just about the first quarter. I can't sit back and worry about Netflix at this point. I gotta find another gear and keep going. And that's what you see in Luka and Kyrie. Their gears can, even if they start a little slow, their gears continue to turn, and they are the ultimate competitors that want to win a game.
Right. Always threats, no matter how poorly it's going. Luka Doncic didn't make a three until he hit one from the logo to bury the Timberwolves last night. When we return, we'll get into how Julius Randle is fitting, plus early season red flags, next on the Minnesota Basketball Party. We are presented today by Game Time, the best and easiest way to get tickets in your area, whether that is sports, concerts, comedy, theater, or so much more. Game Time Picks is their curation feature that filters out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats, so there's no time wasted. Turn on the all-in pricing, so there's no hidden fees. Get a panoramic view from your seat. Get into Target Center. Get to an upcoming Wolves game. The atmosphere there, even though they lost last night, still extremely awesome. XL Energy Center, wild or red hot. One more Gophers game at Huntington Bank Stadium, and of course, US Bank Stadium this Sunday night, all available at Game Time. And the Game Time lowest price guarantee gives you 110% of the difference if you find better seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, and thanks to our everydayers who enjoy our full lineup here at Locked On Sports Minnesota. It's the Minnesota Football Party Mondays and Thursdays. We're doing this on Wednesdays. Ron Johnson show on Tuesdays. He had Gophers legend and former first-round pick Lawrence Maroney on the show yesterday. Very cool. All right, why don't we go to Ben to start this one off. The Minnesota Timberwolves made a big trade. I don't know if you're aware, but Julius Randle's a Timberwolf now. We talked a little bit about him in segment one. But other than game one, feels like the fit's been pretty encouraging. I think people were pretty upset after the Lakers game. It didn't look like it was natural at all. And Randle's come alive these last three. So give me your take. And again, we haven't talked to you, Ben, on the show yet this season. Kind of your overall take on the Randle fit and what you've seen so far in this first week.
Yeah, I mean, I was worried about, I think the thing most people were worried about related to the fit was spacing, but also just, the ball stopping potential, right? With the Knicks, the way the Knicks play, it's a little bit different than how, Jalen Brunson and Anthony Edwards are two different players, obviously. And the Knicks sometimes got bogged down last year when there was ball stopping from both Brunson and Randle. And that's been the Wolves kind of bugaboo over the last couple of years, is Anthony Edwards occasionally getting into that mode. And to me, it was a little bit of that, and then it was a little bit, the concern was spacing when Randle and Gobert were on the floor together, because Randle's not the threat that Karl-Anthony Towns is, and he also prefers to operate in the middle of the floor, whereas Cat, he also was such a threat spaced out anywhere outside the arc. But to this point, I think what's worked really well is that Randle's been very decisive. He's not holding the ball necessarily, and they occasionally will call for an isolation for him to give him the opportunity to operate with space. But most of the time he's getting the ball and going, or he's getting the ball and shooting, and he's been judicious with his 3-point attempts, even a little bit hesitant early on in the season, like that Lakers game where he wouldn't shoot a three for the longest time. And now I feel like all the decisions he's making, the vast majority of the decisions he's making are really decisive, and they're the right decision. Because as long as he goes quick, and we used to say this about Cat too, when Cat would hold the ball, be indecisive about what he wanted to do, it would lend itself to double teams and triple teams and turnovers and, offensive fouls and things like that. But if Randall gets the ball and goes, he becomes that much more dynamic and that much more dangerous. And then it opens things up for Anthony Edwards. And then also, I haven't had a chance yet. We're still obviously only 4 games in, but I want to pull like, what's Randall look like when Ant's off the floor? What does Ant look like when Randall's off the floor? Because to me, long term, once we look at take a more macro view of the season, that's going to be huge, because I think Randall's going to be better as the lone scorer on the floor, lone star scorer, if you want to call it that, than Karl-Anthony Towns was, because that's the type of mentality that Randall has, and his ability to punish mismatches, which I think is something that, only happens maybe 2 or 3 times a game, where he gets a mismatch and he can really take them into the paint. But if you consider what Cat did when he'd get a mismatch, which oftentimes was an offensive foul, to now turn that into a bucket more often than not is a big difference, right? A turnover and a made bucket are 2 very different things. It's about as different as you can get. So I think over the course of the season, that'll make a big difference. And we've seen that already. Also in the playoffs, that's going to make a massive difference. So the early returns are definitely very positive. And as long as they don't get into these my turn, your turn kind of ball stopping phases for too long, and to this point, it hasn't been too bad, the fit to me offensively has looked really good. I don't think Randall's been as good defensively as Cat was last year. Again, we're talking about 4 games. And so there's potential for that to get better. But offensively, I think it's been Randall's decisiveness. And I think it's been his ability to punish mismatches and to play bully ball that we just didn't see routinely out of Karl-Anthony Towns. And that to me is most encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to debate that the offensive end has been a smashing, success these last 3 games. In their losses, I felt like they just look smaller on the glass without Cat. And I think it could be a problem as the year goes on. Rudy gets a lot of rebounds, but he's also not snatching a lot of 50-50 balls because he doesn't have great hands. And Randall's not going to get you a Cat amount of rebounds on a regular basis. But Ron, we did talk to you about this last week as well. But your thoughts on what you've seen from Randall recently, including last night.
Yeah, and so Julius Randle, I don't know what it is about lefties, but lefty big men seem to have a little bit more finesse with their game. I don't know if it's because of how they grew up. I don't know if it's because just how they're built. Same with baseball. You look at Freddie Freeman. Even my kid, she was right-handed. They told her to switch to left-handed to bat. It's just something about that Ken Griffey swing. It's the same thing in basketball. Lefties just seem to be a little bit more smooth with it. They're a little bit more. They're not bull in the china shop, and that's and Ben Beacon. I know Cat caught a stray there, but. It's true. He was a bull in the china shop at times, where every time he got the ball, he crossed over, put his head down, and you could it was like the meme of Leonardo DiCaprio, oh, there it goes. Here he comes. He's about to do it. And he would run somebody over, and then he would look at the ref what did I do? What do you mean? What did you do? You ran the guy over. So Julius Randle is a natural scorer. It does feel like he's really decisive. He takes the shot right away. He doesn't defer if he doesn't have to. I think I agree. I think the offensive fit, to me, that's why I wanted this a long time ago. But defensively, team chemistry, that's where they got to figure this out. Where does he play in this role? Again, I think Dante DiVincenzo, I think Naz Reid and Jaden Daniels on defense. Jaden McDaniels, those on defense is what needs to help out Julius Randle. I think they got to find it with Rudy, Naz, Jaden McDaniels. You got to find a way to have those 3 on the court more. To pick up some of that defensiveness that you're missing. And I think they should be fine. And Chris Finch he's paid a lot of money to do this. Like Anthony Edwards says, I don't want to be Chris Finch when I get old. But I think what he doesn't realize is that's called wise. Chris Finch might be moving a little slower. He might look weird because he got his leg broke. But he's smart. And so I think he's going to figure that out, that here's my defensive lineup. Here's the team that can go and push the ball. And then the minute it feels a little off, let's get him out. Let's get these other guys on the floor. But yeah, I think Julius Randle's fit right now. I love it offensively. I think it gives him a different piece. And him and Ant, everybody knows this. It takes time to get together and gel and become teammates. Just like it was with Gobert and Cat, it took time. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I think they should be fine.
The chat is ripping the transition defense and the defense in general. Let's get Jack Borman on this, because you teased early on. Last night was the full Julius Randle experience.
It was. I think, when you look at everything that Julius Randle is pretty darn good at, he's a much better playmaker than Karl-Anthony Towns is, in that I think Julius Randle is better at putting the ball on the deck in order to, kick the ball out to his teammates or draw a second defender, and then being able to make the defense pay and play, 5-on-4 or 4-on-3 behind that second defender that comes. And we saw that last night. I think he had 7 assists last night. Julius Randle's leading the Timberwolves in assists so far this season. And there's no question that Julius Randle's playmaking was an important part of getting Anthony Edwards going last night. He kind of sensed, all right, this is Ant time. And he did a great job of trying to get into the middle of the paint to kick the ball out to try to create more opportunities for Anthony Edwards from beyond the arc. And then with Randle too, I think we've seen plenty of that bully ball that we've seen, or that, we've come to enjoy through the first 3 games, right? I mean, Julius Randle so far this season, is shooting 70% at the rim, which will certainly play, and is very good. He's shooting 10 of 16 from 3 so far this year. He made all 3 of his threes last night. And so far this season, half of his makes have been assisted, half of his makes have been unassisted, which is about what you get from Julius Randle. But unfortunately for Julius Randle, I think I used to talk about this when D'Angelo Russell was with the Timberwolves. If you made just a 2-column, pro and con list with Randle, where one column is how many points he scores and the other column is how many points is he directly responsible for giving up, whether it be getting beat backdoor for a layup, not closing out in transition for whatever reason to PJ Washington giving up a 3 right after he makes a 3 on the other end of the floor, like it's going to net out pretty close to even. And his defense was atrocious pretty much the entire game last night, especially in transition. He and Rudy Gobert really struggled to get back, even off of makes, which was a tough watch. But you do have to give Julius a little bit of credit in that in the fourth quarter, he got switched out onto Kyrie Irving quite a bit in the first 7, 8, 9 minutes of that third quarter, or that fourth quarter, and really held his own. So I think if he can just really do a better job of just trying to find that discipline that he displayed in the fourth quarter throughout the first 3 quarters, and just, hey, don't get beat backdoor. If a guy's a shooter in transition, make sure you try to find him. Like, those are all things that are just effort. It's not a matter of, oh, I'm just not a good defender, I can't do this, or talent or anything like that. It's just he's got to be a little bit more locked in. But yeah, I think the other part of it too for Randle is rebounding, right? I think when you look at Rudy Gobert, when Rudy Gobert is on the floor, the Timberwolves have a defensive rebounding rate, so percentage of opponent misses that they rebound of 72%. And that would be, right now, that would be roughly 10th in the league. But when Rudy's off the floor, it dips to 64.2%, which would be bottom 5 in the NBA. So he's got to take more pride in rebounding, especially when Gobert is off the floor. We've seen that he's been a pretty good contested rebounder so far. We saw that again last night. It's just something that they're going to have to improve upon. But the last thing that I'll say about Randle that we saw last night was Chris Finch went to Julius Randle at the 5, around the 8-minute mark of the fourth quarter. And that was something we hadn't seen yet in the first 3 games, and they were terrific. They had played 7 offensive possessions in that stretch that Randle was the 5, the lone big man on the floor. They scored at least 1 point on all 7 of those possessions. And that was something that really got the Timberwolves back into the game. It was a completely different look. They had Jaden McDaniels at the 4 during that stretch, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker was great there too. And so I think Chris Finch being willing to tap into everything that Julius Randle offers you on the offensive end of the floor, especially as a passer at the 5 too. I think that's going to be really important, and something that we should continue to keep an eye on. But if they can continue to get him at the rim, shooting threes and straying away from that mid-range area, he was 1 of 5 in the mid-range. Last night, he was 6 of 8 everywhere else. So I think if you can really just focus on what he's good at and try to empower what he's good at, and try to, help him stay away from what he struggles with, at least on the offensive end of the floor, I think that's going to be a good recipe for success, considering that, it seems like defensively he's shown us what he is so far, and that, there's going to be maybe half the nights he's going to be locked in off the ball and half the nights he's really not. And it's just going to be, it's just going to be pretty tough to put together good defensive stretches on those nights.
Yeah, Reggie, this was the Tim Connolly risk that he took, right? Knowing that you might be affecting your defensive chemistry. You're going to maybe take a risk to improve your offense marginally. You might take a step back defensively. It's probably what's happened so far. Give me a little bit of Randall content here to tie a bow on this segment.
Yeah, I think, you try to rally around guys like Rudy and Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards and Nas Reed, as far as guys that are going to maximize that defensive effort and try to galvanize the team. But this is a different defensive team, I should say, than last year's team. And I think give them some time and Finchie will kind of get it figured out. But not to belabor or echo too much of what everybody else said, which I think is spot on. I think the one thing that I was really worried about as far as a fit with Julius Randle was just what everybody said, like him holding the ball and him, calling, waving Ant off when he's like about to go ISO bully ball and, maybe missing the layup. But, I think it is nice to see when he does make those drives that he's not getting a charge like Cat would. And I think it's so tough just because of, the trade and who these guys, got traded for, that Cat and Randall are going to continue to be compared. I saw a graphic on TNT last night before the game. They had Cat on one side and Randall on the other side. And I'm just like, it's kind of tough because they do two different things, but because they got traded for one another, I think that's going to continue to be a thing where people kind of measure, okay, what is Cat doing? What is Randall doing? Is this working? But one thing I think I was pleasantly surprised about, especially last night, Randall went 3 for 3 from three. And, some of those threes were like, I specifically remember one in the corner last night where he kind of like, did a little move and then got the three off and it was nothing but net. And I was just like, oh, this is, like he's not, best shooting big man in the game as Cat proclaims. But, I think he has some efficiency there from behind the arc. And I think that is a pleasant surprise for me. And, probably a pleasant, maybe not surprised, but something that the fans will take from Randall being able to knock down these threes at the clip that he's doing it. But if you can get 20, 25 from Julius Randle every night, I think that you take that 10 times out of 10, and that probably means the Wolves will, be in all of these games that they play.
Dare I say, it'll be a good year for Julius Randle if he shoots 63% from three. I think it's going to go well for him.
Yeah, it would be, Sam.
It would be historic. When we come back, early season red flags, including what's up with Mike Conley. That's coming up next on the Minnesota Basketball Party. A very, very quick pause. And make sure to check out the postcasts again with Luke Inman and Jack Borman talking Wolves. We also got Gophers postcast featuring our very own Ron Johnson after Gophers and Vikings games. That's this Saturday. They play Illinois. Then Sunday night, it's the Vikings and the Colts. All right, early season red flags. I mentioned Mike Conley. I'll kind of start there, and I'd love to get some of your thoughts and some of your other red flags. But Mike Conley seems like a big one, considering that he's 37. And you worry about a cliff sometimes. And I think we assumed that he was a little bit immortal, the way he takes care of his body, the way he had a career year in some senses last season, not being very aggressive as a scorer. And maybe that's an intentional decision. Maybe he believes that, that's just not his role anymore with so many mouths to feed on this team. But he is only shooting 27% from three. And that's kind of his main contribution offensively, is the 3-point shooting, down to 4.5 assists as well. So that would be a red flag that I'm concerned about. Let's swing it back to Reggie Wilson. Give us a red flag from this early season.
I just think, and we've kind of hit on this, but just how clunky the offense can be. I think to spin it, in the fourth, where it seemed like maybe the game was kind of getting away, the Wolves did come back and make a game of it. But, I think they do need to find an offensive identity. I think it can look a little bit more in sync and just a little bit more poetic out there than it's looking right now. And I think that honestly is just coming from the fact that you got a group of guys who aren't necessarily used to each other yet. I think that's a red flag for me. I think Finchie is still trying to figure out the rotations as well. I'm wondering if he's just going to be content to play 9 guys, or will he get minutes for guys like Minot, Garza? And sometimes I wonder if he will, I know he doesn't necessarily want to play the rookies right away, but if they do need a little bit of a spark, you got some hungry guys ready to come in and show and prove what they're worth. Like, will he just maybe throw one or two of those guys in there just to maybe try to get a spark? And just try to figure it out. So I'm interested to see how things kind of progress offensively, but I think the red flag is really not a big red flag for me. It's just they gotta just kind of figure each other out and find some harmony out there offensively.
Ben Beacon.
Yeah, part of me wants to, like, the easy answer for me is turnovers, because that was the issue, is the same major problem last year, right? Like, you look at their shot profile, the shots they get are good shots. The shots that they take, they mostly make. Like, they were the 3rd best 3-point shooting team in the league last year, and they were like a middle of the pack at best offense. And they just, the turnovers are unbelievable. You go back the last few years, typically there's like, if you look at the top 10 offenses, it's like 2 of the top 10 can be a top 10 offense and turn the ball over, in the bottom third of the league, have a bottom third of the league turnover rate. So I don't know that that's surprising. And actually, I think the offense has flowed a little bit better than I expected early in the season. It's just frustrating because it's such a self-inflicted issue. And they're silly ones, right? It's Ant dribbling the ball off his foot, or, not throwing a terrible lob to Rudy or whatever. Like, they're things that like can be fixed. To me, though, I don't know that I'd call it a red flag, just because it was also a thing last year, and it's just, maybe it's just a thing, and I hope I'm wrong, but like, hopefully they fix it at some point. The bigger issue to me is the consistency on defense. And we talked a lot about transition defense earlier in the show, and that's the biggest thing. But even the half court defense has been just not tight enough. The perimeter defense has been spotty. I think Rudy's looked slow. He was great against the Raptors, but I don't think Rudy's looked great so far this year. And, I worry a little bit about just that intensity level that they showed. It's so hard to be as dominant as they were last year as a unit defensively, and then come back and have the same motivation to do the same thing. And we've all at least I kind of chalked it up to, like, before the season kind of wrote in ink, like, okay, they're going to be a top 3 defense again. They really kind of have to be, if they're going to turn the ball over like this, and they're going to have some of these other issues offensively. If they're going to go to the finals, they've got to be a top, at least 5 defense, and the offense has to kind of stay where it's at now, minus some turnovers. So to me, it's just the lack of urgency and consistency defensively. And then on the offensive side, it's overall the turnover issues that just have not yet been solved.
Ron Johnson, red flag.
Yeah, I mean, my red flag is going to be like the number of players that play. So when you look at like the rotation, it just feels like he's trying to throw spaghetti up against a wall and make it stick without even trying Rob Dillingham. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I just worry about getting some guys in the game just because you feel like they need a couple minutes, or do you just go with, like, here's the 7 guys that I'm gonna go with. These other 2 might not play, or I'm gonna go with these 7, and then these 4 become rotational guys that move into that 9. Because sometimes some of the guys that get in, I'm like, you're not getting anything out of them. You're just getting a rest from some guys, but are you actually getting production? And so I think that for me has to change. Like, you got to find a way to see what other guys can do. So with 82 games, especially, like, it's just too early to not do it. Like, it's way too early to feel like you got to be stuck in what you're doing. Get those guys in. I mean, if Bronny James can play, I'm pretty sure Rob Dillingham can play. So you got to be able to find a way to get some of these guys in, other than just like, Joe Ingles comes in and it just like, I like him. I wanted him. But I just don't know where he fits. Like, is he just going to be a come in, you get 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to shoot every single time you touch it? Or are you, like, what are you? And so that's my only red flag, is figuring out the rotation with the bench.
Yeah, we'll definitely dive into the rotation a little bit more here in the final segment. Jack Borman, though, red flag.
Yeah, the two biggest ones for me are ones that they didn't struggle with last season that they are struggling with mightily so far this season. The first one is transition defense. The Timberwolves allowed the sixth fewest points in transition last season, 13.2 points per game. This season they are allowing the fourth most at 19.3. That's a pretty huge jump. And then the other one for me is interior defense. Timberwolves have allowed the third most points per game in the paint so far this season at 55 points a game. Last year, they allowed the second fewest at 46.1 points per game. When Rudy Gobert is on the floor so far this season, according to Cleaning the Glass, Timberwolves are allowing their opponents to shoot 7 percentage points better at the rim when Rudy Gobert is on the floor than compared to when he is off the floor. That's like only the second time in Rudy Gobert's career that opponents are shooting better at the rim with him on the floor compared to being off the floor. So that's something that they're certainly going to have to clean up. And now look, like in the short mid-range area, they're shooting 18% worse, which is a great number. So it's just a matter of like, hey, if you can prevent opponents from getting all the way to the rim and allow Rudy to force guys to take more of those floaters as opposed to getting all the way to the rim, I think that's something that they certainly have to clean up. I'm not worried at all about Mike Conley. We saw him play very high level basketball for extended stretches last year. He's a great catch and shoot guy. I think it's just more of you got to get Dante DiVincenzo into more of a rhythm. He's a feel guy and just has to get more used to playing with these guys. And the other one for me, selfishly, I guess would just be free throw shooting. There's nothing that frustrates me more than guys missing free throws. Like Ant shooting 6 to 12 last night after shooting 83, 84%, whatever it was last season. It's inexcusable. 65% from the free throw line is pretty putrid in a game that you lose by 6 points. So I'd like to see them improve there as well.
Yeah, let's talk about this bench rotation now, because they've really been consistent for the first 4 games. They've played the same 9. Ingles, and Joe Ingles is the one you circle because you're obviously going to play Dante. You're obviously playing Nikhil, who's been great, and you're playing Naz. The 9th spot is the one that's in flux. This is what you've gotten from Joe Ingles. He's played 7, 5, 6, and 4 minutes. He's taken 2 shots. He's got 1 rebound combined in all 4 games. Did have 4 assists against Toronto, which is nice, but it's not really clear what he's offering. If not elite, he hasn't scored at all. Is he giving you elite defense? I don't know if that's the case. So I think Ron, let's swing it back to you. You make a good point, like wondering why in the early season, when you're trying to figure out new pieces, why wouldn't you take a stab at a Dillingham, at a Shannon? And if not the rookies, why not a Minot? Right? Like, why not a Luka Garza? Why not find a niche? It doesn't have to be a big niche, but why not find a little niche for some of these bench pieces that are intriguing prospects?
Yeah, in football, we always would wonder that too in our shows. We'd be like, hey, why isn't this guy playing? Why isn't Dallas Turner playing? Football, you can see a lot in practice. You can see a lot on film. Basketball, you don't know until the guy's out there. And so that's why it's very weird to me because basketball is one of those sports that all of a sudden you have a hero that you didn't expect. Whether it's, just transition defense is better. Maybe he's a little bit quicker. Maybe he's an energy guy. And that's what I feel like Rob Dillingham could be, is come in and be an energy guy, where Joe Ingles comes in and seems like he's a Halloween skeleton guy. Like, it's just like, hey, he's here. Like what's next? Like there's no meat to it. It's just bones. And so I do wonder that, like, what is this about? Is it something we're not? Is it maturity in practice? Is it meetings? Because there's a lot more to basketball than just on the court. We know that. And so there has to be something going on in the facility that we're not seeing. That is maybe the hesitation that they haven't put Rob Dillingham out there. You don't pick a guy that high, and then he sits like this. And again, 4 minutes. You're telling me he can't get 4 minutes, and that's what's strange to me. So I do feel like, yeah, those other 8, you kind of roll with that. That 9th spot every night should be a different guy, because it's not like you're getting a ton of production out of one guy anyway. So that 9th spot every night should be a different guy. It's kind of like little league sports, where it's always like all the parents are like, well, when is my kid going to play? All right, he'll get his little 4 minutes. Here he goes. That's how he needs to treat that 9th spot. Like, act like these parents are there waiting. I'm pretty sure Rob Dillingham's parents are somewhere waiting. But just give it a shot. And then maybe you get a shot in the arm. Maybe you get some energy that you didn't know you had. And that's why I would just try it.
Yeah, Jack, what's your read on why that move or any other bench move hasn't been made?
Yeah, I think for me, it's mostly just that Chris Finch wants these top 8 guys to play as much as they can, in the interim while you have some games spaced out here so that they can just develop some chemistry early on in the season. I think it's inevitable that guys are going to get hurt. I don't think Chris Finch wants Mike Conley playing more than 65 games, even if he had 0 injuries. So there's going to be time when guys miss games. I just think right now the priority is just like, hey, this is 2 of the top 8 guys are new. And we need to, and they're really important offensive players, and we just want to get them more minutes playing with the other 6 that have been here for the last few years. So I think that's just the biggest reason why. But I do think the rotation will expand to 9 and even 10 potentially, if guys are missing time.
And Reggie, do you get the sense that it is Dillingham who's the next card he would play, or do you think that is he a liability defensively to the point where you think that he would be viewed as unplayable? Could that be why it's taken a while here?
I think Finchie just kind of sees him as maybe a bit erratic and maybe needs to he's going to play fast, but maybe the game might be a little fast for him and maybe it needs to slow it down a little bit so he can actually play fast and the game is not as fast to him. And I think he's just trying to maybe save him from himself out there and try to make sure that he's not out there costing them, from a turnover standpoint or, things like that. And yeah, maybe, he's trying to get them to lock in on defense a little bit. I remember talking to Nas earlier this year during the playoffs, and he was saying that, defense wasn't necessarily his strong suit coming into the league, but now he takes pride in it. And he, sees it as a challenge that he wants to be a better defender night in and night out. And so, you want to see a guy, do that. I think, you look at Ant and, everybody talks about his scoring prowess and all of that. But, Ant wants to lock in on the defensive end as well. Like he's a great two-way player in the league. And so, I think they want to see a little bit more from Dillingham from that standpoint, but also just let him see the game and just kind of watch and understand how it's played at this level before they throw him out there. But I think, before long, it's going to be time to throw him out there just to see what he can do. And like I said earlier, just to see if he can provide a little bit of a spark, especially in those times where, Ann is getting a breather or, you just need something from someone. He can come in there and blow by a guy and get a layup and kind of infuse some energy into the team that's on the court at the time.
Mm-hmm. Ben.
Yeah, the rotation doesn't bother me yet. We're 4 games in. Go back 2 seasons. Naz Reid got 5 DNP CDs in the first 14 games 2 years ago. And then by the end of that season, people were talking about him as a 6th man of the year, and then he wins it last year. So these things change quickly, especially early in the season. And, to the point we talked earlier about, like, why not try some stuff? It's early in the season. I think the opposite is true. Like, why not make sure you know what you have for who's supposed to be your top 8? Because no matter how this thing is sliced and diced, like, unless somebody gets a longer term injury, or we talked, I think Jack mentioned Mike Conley's probably not going to play nearly as many games as he did last year. Guys are going to play eventually. So these are your top 8, no matter what, unless there's a catastrophic injury, God forbid, that are going to be the top 8 in the playoffs. Like Rob Dillingham's going to play in the regular season. Just like last year at the start of the season, Julian Strother and, Zeke Naji were playing heavy minutes for the Nuggets. Those guys weren't playing heavy minutes in the playoffs. No matter what happens, Dillingham's not going to be in the playoff rotation, at least not in the top 8. So let's see. I think the thought process is let's see what we have with the top 8, build the chemistry, as Jack mentioned. And then if somebody gets hurt, if we're resting somebody in a back-to-back, maybe there's an opportunity this Friday, Saturday, the first back-to-back of the season, home road Friday, Saturday in San Antonio. Maybe that's an opportunity for a Rob Dillingham or a Josh Minott to get some minutes. And, there's plenty of time to work those guys in. These things tend to work themselves out. And, he's like, I don't know, he's not going to be better than the top 8 guys that are already playing. Like, we could talk about the Joe Ingles spot, but Joe Ingles is there to provide some stability and, do a few of the things that Kyle Anderson used to do. And I don't know that Rob Dillingham is going to give you stability immediately at his first, NBA appearance. So I don't know that him in place of Joe Ingles for 5 minutes does a whole lot for you. He's going to get chances later. They're sitting here 2-2. So it's not like, they've obviously still got stuff to figure out with this top 8. So I think if we get to, Thanksgiving and it's still the same 8 guys, I actually would have more concern in terms of the number of minutes these guys are playing this early in the season, because it does look like a playoff rotation. If you look at the box score, you compare that to, an April or May box score, and it looks a lot more like that. over the course of the season, that's going to take its toll on some of these guys. And that would be my bigger concern than, we got to get the rookies out there as soon as possible. So we'll see how it changes. But I mean, these early season box scores never look like they look in December, January, February.
Yeah, you're about to get into maybe one of your most forgiving stretches of the season. After the Nuggets, you've got Spurs, Hornets, Bulls, Blazers, Heat, Blazers, Blazers. That could be a chance to get some garbage time minutes. Let's predict the week. 3 games this week. Nuggets on Friday. Nuggets have been in absolute shambles, but they somehow forced overtime against bad teams the last 2 games and won. So they're 2-2. Then you got the Spurs on Saturday, Hornets on Monday. Jack Borman, 3 games this week. Predict it for me.
Is everyone sitting down?
You're going
holding on
you're going
to your
0-3, huh? 0-3.
All right. RELAX. All right. Timberwolves will be 5-2 when we come back to sit back down here next Wednesday. All right. 5-2. All right. They'll be fine. A year ago, the day before Thanksgiving, they were the day before Halloween, they were 1-2. 6 weeks later, they were 17-4. Let's just deep breaths. All right. Let's relax. 3-0.
Reggie.
I'm gonna say 2-1. 2-1. Might lose the game to the Nuggets, but they'll win the other 2.
The Nuggets just haven't played a good game yet. It seems like they're due, and they might get up for this Wolves game. But I'm honest. I'm worried about Wemby on Saturday. I think that's the type of game that a team with new pieces could go and lose. Second half of the back-to-back. Maybe you're not 100%. Feeling like yourself. That's where the chemistry could trip you up. So I'm going to go 2-1 with a Spurs loss. How about Ben?
I'm going to go 3-0. I think the Denver game, to your point, I think they could get up for this one, should get up for this one, and they're due for a good game at some point. But I think they go 3-0 this week, and a week from now we're feeling a lot better.
And Ron?
Yeah, I was torn, but I'm going to go 2-1. I think either the Nuggets or the Spurs, one of those is a loss. I think the Hornets, unfortunately, should be an easy win, but hopefully it doesn't turn out to be some crap. They were like, what are they out there doing right now? But yeah, I'd say 2-1. Between the Spurs and the Nuggets, I think one of those is a loss.
All right, we do this every Wednesday. It's the Minnesota basketball party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Thanks for watching, listening, and commenting. Find the audio of this show, the Locked On Wolves podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Watch the postcasts with Jack Borman. Watch Reggie Wilson on KARE 11, Ben Beacon, Locked On Wolves, and Ron Johnson, The Ron Johnson Show. I'm Sam Ekstrom. Talk to you next time.